says, "It wasn't like this before Trudeau," by Pierre Poilievre, our electoral candidate for the Prime Minister of Canada. Let's see what this video is, and then I'm going to watch this one right after it, just because they work so well in tandem.
I was watching the hockey game here, the Calgary game. I was in my family room. And, you all of a sudden know exactly what's going on because you hear glass breaking and chaos.
This was the scene outside a home near Avenue and Chaplin around 10:30 last Tuesday night. Four masked men walk by the home, which has bollards and two luxury SUVs in the driveway, and 30 seconds later return, crossing the grass and heading right for the front door. They first unsuccessfully attempt to break through a glass window on the main floor. Then one of the suspects, using what appears to be a hammer, smashes through glass in the front door before gaining entry. As the home alarm, which was activated, begins to go.
This is why we need self-defense laws. Straight up. Fucking shoot them. I don't care. Why? You know what you're doing. Get off. Stop smacking my fucking window with a hammer. And I wouldn't shoot you. But no. You're going to keep smacking my window with a hammer, so I'm going to shoot you. This is why we need self-defense laws in Canada. Straight up. So I need to put this label on. Whoops. Alright.
Off.
I got up right away to go to the front door and start pushing back to try to tell them to get out of my house. And I thought I saw a gun. I don't know whether, you never know whether they're real or not. I didn't care. I was just trying to defend myself, my home, and I knew my wife was upstairs.
The couple, both in their 60s, do not want to be identified.
Because like you can so easily get a BB gun that looks like a real gun and scare the fuck out of people because they just don't know. And then, especially now with all the real guns coming in, now you really don't know. So it's getting worse and worse, man. It's a big problem.
Because the suspects remain at large.
They were beating me with something on the head pretty violently, but I didn't want to go down because I didn't want them to go upstairs. And they started slicing my arms. It might have been a knife or glass, but they cut my hands, my arms pretty badly.
One of the suspects managed to make his way up to the bedroom where his wife was sleeping. And
the first thing I saw was a guy, all in black, a balaclava, in my bedroom, which was total black. The second he left the framework of my bedroom, I picked up my phone and I called 911.
2.5 minutes later, the perpetrators were gone, having stolen nothing.
I said, "What do you want?" And they never told me. He said, we know. One guy said something to the effect of, "Just be quiet."
The homeowners say at one point, one of the suspects grabbed the husband's cell phone, but in the commotion, the phone dropped. What were they after?
Cars.
We think, because I didn't think they ever said that.
That's what the police told us. But we have bollards, so they need those to go down.
The couple says just 2 days earlier at 4 a.m., four masked men cased out their home. Police believe they are the same four suspects responsible for the home invasion and assault. The alarm company notified the couple of the suspicious activity. And while the homeowners were concerned, they never imagined this.
I was bleeding all over the place. I don't even remember. I thought it was cut everywhere. There was a bad beating.
And the police said, yes, car theft is rampant. Something has to be done. This is out of control.
Yeah.
Now, the head of the hold-up squad calls this incident deeply troubling.
I sincerely believe that we actually need the right to defend our properties and defend our homes and family. We need the right to bear arms. That's what it is. We need the right to defend ourselves. We need the right to stand up to this. Because you can never leave it up to a government body to do all of the work. They can do a lot of it. They can do 99% of it. But there's always that 1% chance. And in that 1% chance, you need the right to defend yourself. You know, look at El Salvador. They have like most of their violent criminals locked up. But that doesn't stop people from being violent. That doesn't mean there's no violent criminals. That just means that there's no violent criminals with a history. There's still violent criminals, they just haven't done anything yet. So we need the right to bear arms in order to defend our families in cases like this. Like, it's seriously, that's my belief.
So far this year, Holdup has investigated 101 home invasions targeting vehicles. That's up from 46 in all of last year. As for the husband, he has to undergo surgery on Thursday to reattach tendons that were severed during that attack. He also has what could be a concussion. Doctors are monitoring that. That being said, this couple says they are grateful to police and paramedics who responded within less than a minute after the suspects fled. They're warning other homeowners to remain vigilant and always put on your alarm even when you're at home. Back to you.
A good reminder, but obviously an extremely terrifying situation.
It is always a smart thing, but yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have to worry about stuff like that. You shouldn't have to worry about 3 or 4 masked dudes running into your house, smashing your windows out with hammers, slicing you with glass or knives. Like, dude, the guy could have died very easily. They easily could have just murdered these two old people here.
Where his wife.
Like, realistically, these are old people. They really couldn't have defended themselves that hard. If all 4 of them had knives, they're dead. And they want to cause harm to these people, they're gone. They can't do anything. So, yeah, I think we do need the right to bear arms. I think that's a very serious thing. But yeah, I also wanted to watch this. This was, at least we aren't Canada. How money works. I wish I could say the same, but unfortunately, I live in Canada.
Covering business, finance, and economics every week can be a little bit depressing. In just the last 2 years, personal savings have been evaporated, consumer debt has hit record highs, the job market has been defined by anti-worker trends such as ghost jobs, broad sector layoffs, and gigification, all while asset prices have ballooned far faster than household incomes or even their intrinsic fundamentals.
Yeah, I was actually, I was hit by this
ghost jobs, broad sector layoffs, and gigification.
Broad sector layoffs. Yep.
All while asset prices have ballooned far faster than household incomes or even their intrinsic fundamentals. The results have been pretty simple. It's getting much harder for people who work for a living to keep up with those who already have assets. Even the most diligent and career-focused people are finding it tough to make ends meet, let alone accumulate assets so that they too can one day achieve financial security. But even if you are feeling it's all a bit hopeless,
yeah, and
just
that creates
remember,
a big problem for society as a whole. Because we're always told that, money doesn't buy happiness and this and that, and that's true, because money does not buy happiness. But money allows people to have the feeling or the ability to feel secure or stable or productive. It feels like they're getting somewhere. When you're able to kind of, even if you're saving, $20 a month and you're building a $20 a month and $20 a month, and 2 months later you got $40, and another month later you got $60. People end up seeing that savings over time and end up figuring that out. But faster and faster, those savings get lower and lower and end up going further into the negatives, causing people to become, jaded with the outlook on things, where it's like, oh my god, why should I even work? Why should I do this? Why should I do that? There's no point. I'm not even getting anywhere. So yeah, it's a big problem, and I feel like people should take it very seriously.
it could be worse. You could be from Canada.
How the hell is anyone existing in Canada? I feel trapped.
It's saying house prices in Vancouver are expected to rise, get back to the peak where they were at 2 years ago.
This landlord did pay for her to live in a motel for a short period of time, but that has ended. She says her only option was to move into her shed.
There's no place else you could afford to live.
As Canadian students head back to school, a growing number are still trying to find work.
The latest U.S. Census data shows in 2022, more than 126,000 people moved from Canada to the United States.
Okay, so a big problem across the world right now.
How many?
More than 126,000 people moved from Canada to the United States.
Nobody took me with?
Okay, so a big problem across the world right now are figures like GDP, stock market.
Hold on, let me read those quick. GDP report, latest estimate shows economy grew by 2.8% in the third quarter of 2024. Payrolls increased 227,000 in November, more than expected, and unemployment rate at 4.2%.
Like GDP, stock market prices, and unemployment numbers that look really, really good, but don't actually help out the people whose incomes have not kept up with productivity, don't own stock, and are working for of the new.
Yeah, I get what he's saying. The economy looks very good in a lot of different ways, and actually, even now, the economy in the U.S., I believe, is slowly rising if you look at it from a certain lens. But if you look at the general view, people aren't doing well. And that's because of the wealth distribution. Like he actually just mentioned, the people who are working, the working class people, don't have assets, don't have things to, you know, actually profit off of the gains that the general world makes. They don't have a house, they don't have stock, they don't have a business, they don't have anything to kind of gain off of this. So it's very hard for the working class to actually see any kind of gain or profit or increase in their money, when in reality there is a general increase in I don't know what the exact increase of the number was, like what exact chart it was for, but like there's general increases in the like general wealth of the U.S. Basically is what I'm saying.
New jobs that have been created and are still struggling with bills. But in Canada, not even the big picture numbers look good anymore. GDP growth has been sluggish, and because of population growth driven by high levels of immigration, GDP per capita hasn't really improved at all over the last 10 years. Unemployment is also higher than in America, and average annual wages are far lower. However, there is one area where they have a commanding lead over the USA, and that's average home prices. The average Canadian earns less and has to pay much more for a place to live, making one of the biggest problems in the world right now far worse for our northern brothers. Now, Canada's biggest exports have always been natural resources, manufactured goods, and YouTube videos about how fucked up their housing market is. So this probably doesn't need to be said again, except that a lot of this is missing a much more important problem.
Yeah, that's true.
This is probably going to be
I think I've seen about 3 or 4 of those.
But America has an unaffordable housing problem too, and so does most of the developed world. But Canada is still a little bit different. Comparing the price of real estate worldwide is actually incredibly difficult, because a city like Tokyo is certainly more expensive per square foot than San Francisco. But there are also a lot more small budget friendly-ish apartments for regular people to live in. Which is why, even though it looks almost twice as expensive, the city has been praised for its housing affordability. Here in the United States of urban sprawl, our average dwelling might be more expensive, but it's also a lot larger. So, if you can afford a home, it's probably going to be more comfortable than a similarly priced dwelling in more compact cities. Anyway, a city like Vancouver is roughly the same as a city like Seattle. They have a similar population, similar cultural preferences for freestanding homes spread out around a business district, and they are even relatively close to one another. The price of the average home in the Vancouver metropolitan area is slightly more expensive than the average in Seattle. But Seattle has a median household income more than twice as high as Vancouver, thanks largely to big tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon, which have their global headquarters in the city, as well as dozens of other major tech companies and supporting firms which have big offices there as well. These companies employ lots of people in very well-compensated roles, so they have pushed up the price of real estate in places like San Francisco, New York, and Seattle. As someone who
that's another thing too, is like, some of the bad places to live in the States are only bad because of exactly that. It's like Silicon Valley, San Francisco, the southern Silicon Valley, like Austin, Texas, has basically become the next Silicon Valley. They're like New York, all these places. Like New York had the stock exchange, like I said. Austin's becoming like a little Silicon Valley. Like, these are all extremely incredible places to live because there's a tech that is so valuable that is basically developed in or around that area. It basically revolves around that sector, or was started in that sector. The prices in Canada for houses are just high because they're high. Like, obviously it's not, just because they're high, we want them to be high. But no, like, there's a lot of things that are going on in the background that really disrupt the Canadian house market and destroy families and end up ruining people's lives. And I think Trudeau and the majorative of the government, they just don't care because it's making them money.
to one of these cities to work one of these jobs myself, I am well aware of the problems they cause for locals who can't afford to live in their own homes, but it does at the very least make sense. People with good jobs can afford to pay higher rents, and since those high-paying jobs are only really available in a few cities, they become very expensive. In the States, real estate prices have been driven by a few concentrated industries, but in Canada, real estate is the industry. According to a report by the OECD, real estate in Canada contributed 40% of its capital investment. The USA,
but it's
by
also
comparison, was only
okay. So that's another big problem too. Is it is a huge part of our economy. However, it is not a Canadian economy. Now, what I mean by that, of this 40% of our general economy that comes from real estate, about, I would say, to take a maybe slightly educated guess, roughly 20, maybe to 25% of that is American owned or co-owned in some way or another. Which means it all doesn't come back to Canada. We're still losing a ton of money because it's to American investors. Now that's great, but when it doesn't come back to the average Canadian, then it becomes a really, really, really big problem.
20%. Hilariously, this statistic was proudly reported on by the country's largest real estate agency in a post they made this time last year.
I don't get it. Why are they confessing?
They're not confessing. They're bragging.
Vancouver doesn't have the same availability of jobs where young professionals can make life-changing amounts of money before they are 30 and then move out. No. It's largely a regular city for regular people with opportunities that are not particularly remarkable. To put it another way, nobody is moving to Vancouver to try to get ahead financially like they are in Seattle. And the data backs this up as well.
Yeah.
According to the most recent census data from both of these cities,
very, it depends on what you're in, because actually my brother, one of my oldest brothers, he had a job offer to go out to Vancouver, but he is a plumber. He's a licensed plumber. So, well, I mean, he's a lot more now, but at the time he was just a licensed plumber. And yeah, they were gonna fly him out, pay him like really, really, really good fucking money before he was 30. But I mean, like, that's a trade. You have to go to the trades to do that. And not everybody's going into the trades. Not everybody wants to do trades. And that's where pretty much all the money comes from in Canada. If you're in the trades, you're making a lot of money. Or if you're in real estate, then you're making a lot of money. That's about it. Other than that, you're not making fuck all.
The average age of someone living in Vancouver was 4 years older than someone living in Seattle. This just makes all the problems people are facing a lot worse, because if you live in these cities, your financial situation is not defined by your income or even how financially responsible you are. It depends almost entirely on if you own a home or not. A renter who is a highly skilled professional with diligent savings and an investment plan is going to be financially crushed by someone with an average income and no financial discipline, simply because rent is so high and houses make more money than their inhabitants.
It depends on the area, and it depends on how long you depend on staying. So I've heard this from like a lot of different tax professionals and like real estate professionals and stuff. Depending on the taxes and how much you pay per rent and whatever, if you're only planning to stay there for a short amount of time, it's better to rent. Because I forget their exact reasoning. This was a while ago, and I'm not a real estate professional, so I don't exactly know. But it makes more sense because you end up sacrificing less money if you go into a house. Say that the house is too expensive or something happens, you have to lose the house, then you have to go and get another house and this and that, and then you keep swapping and you're losing money, and then it's like a whole vicious circle. So sometimes it's better to just rent it out cheaply at like a very cheap spot for a year, maybe a year to 3 years, anywhere around there. I think like a year to 5 years is the most that they say. And if you're planning on staying in a place for any longer than, you know, getting up into the 10 years, then you should be looking to buy. But yeah, some of them, some tax, real estate professionals, whatever, say it's better to rent sometimes, but renting is very expensive. So is owning a house too.
Again, the Canadian real estate market is fucked up. You didn't need me to tell you that, but a lot of people leave it at just that. But hot take alert, expensive real estate is not a problem if incomes keep up with prices. Homes in West Virginia seem cheap to Californians, but they would be very expensive to someone living in Bangladesh because of the income differences between these areas. So while it's not as fun as opening up Zillow north of the border and doing some sweejack face to a derelict home that costs more than I will ever make.
Like, this is probably a real ad too. 100% real.
As opening up Zillow.
Hold on, let me go back here. Hold on, look at this.
Because of the income differences between these
Look at
areas.
this.
So while it's not.
Ain't nobody who's younger than 65 has an ironing board in their bedroom. What?
Not as fun as opening up Zillow north of the border and doing some sweejack face to a derelict home that costs more than I will ever make in my lifetime. We do need to dig a little bit deeper. What is actually important in Canada is understanding how it actually got this bad without the household incomes to support it, and what the actual long-term consequences are of this mess. Even for the homeowners, this is not a great situation to be in. So it's time to learn how money works to find out what they are doing in America's hat. This week's video is sponsored by Delete Me. Delete Me is a hands-free service that helps you remove your personal information from data broker websites. These brokers collect and sell your data. Things like your name, address, and phone number without you even knowing. With Delete Me, privacy experts find and remove your data from hundreds of these sites. They also monitor to make
these are actually pretty good and pretty important, to be honest.
Your information doesn't pop up again. Personally, I love how easy it is. I've been using Delete Me to protect my privacy and got a full report showing where my data was removed. It's a relief knowing my info isn't floating around online. And if you're worried about family, they've got plans to protect them too. Take control of your privacy by heading over to joindeleteme.com/HMW and use code HMW for 20% off. Links are in the description. So if it wasn't economic opportunity that made real estate in Canada so expensive, what was it? Well, there are actually 3 factors at play here. My friend Richard from the Plain Bagel actually did a great deep dive on exactly this problem last year. And as a Canadian financial professional, his insights on the topic are definitely worth hearing if you want a more in-depth analysis. The first reason is that Canada is actually surprisingly concentrated. It's the second biggest country in the world.
Yeah, it's literally 70% of all Canadians living in Canada live below this line. This little line right here. There's like a line, like, I think it's like right about there. Like 70% of Canadians live below that line. I'm gonna guess, so the concentration, the taxes, and job insecurity. Those are the 3 reasons that
But most of its people live close to the southern border in just a small handful of cities. Those small cities are largely surrounded by lots of protected natural areas, which makes them lovely places to live. But it also means that when combined with very tight zoning regulations, there just isn't that much place to build new houses. And our Canadian brothers seem to be even more resistant to medium density housing than we are. The second reason is that Canada never really experienced the housing shock of 2008. Their financial sector was a little less jacked to its tits than ours. And they were helped a lot by resource exports to China, so as American real estate was experiencing a massive reset, Canadian property prices barely budged, and any losses were made back within just a few months. This meant that their homes stayed relatively expensive, and investors never got rattled like they did in America, where many people lost everything and became very wary about going all in on real estate again.
Which, okay, so he's kind of getting into this a little bit. I know he's not going to get too deep into any of it. But I kind of think that we're moving into our own forced crash, 2008 crash. I think we're moving into that because house prices are getting so, like you saw, $5 million for grandma's house, for grandma's detached 2-story house. What? That's insane. So I think we're going into a crash, and I think we're going into a reset of our market. It's going to rattle investors. They're not going to be making any money. They're going to be plummeting money. They're going to be pissing money down the drain. because nobody's going to be buying anything, and they're just going to have to keep paying the rent or keep paying the mortgages and property taxes and all that. They're just like, I'm done with this, and everybody's going to pull out. Nobody's going to, like, none of the investors are really going to be in the market. So at least a lot of the weaker ones too, especially, they're just going to leave the market. So that opens up a lot of opportunity for regular people to get into, but it all depends on how fast that happens. But I think it needs to happen. It's like WoW or Overwatch or COD or anything that, well, I guess COD's a little bit less, but you know, say League of Legends or any of these games that go on for way too long, CS:GO, like all this stuff, it needs a reset. It needs like a complete and utter change, just completely annihilate the game and utterly change everything. Reset everybody to zero, that kind of stuff. Obviously not reset everybody to zero in this instance, but basically everybody reset to zero. Like, a bunch of people need to leave. It needs to be a relatively even playing field, and that's what we need to get into. That's what we need to head towards, and I feel like that's what's going to happen, especially with the prices now. It's insane.
The third reason is simply immigration. Canada welcomes about one-fifth as many immigrants into the country every year. This meant that their homes stayed relatively expensive, and investors never got rattled like they did in America, where many people lost everything.
Oh, okay, so okay, that was the second reason, was that they didn't experience the boom. So what did I say? Taxes? I literally just said it too, but I went off on a tangent and forgot. Taxes and some. That wasn't it though. Maybe it was kind of correlated in a small sense. Maybe I got like half a point for that one.
And
maybe.
Became very wary about going all in on real estate again. The third reason is simply immigration. Canada welcomes about one-fifth as many immigrants into the country every year as the US.
I should have actually said, yeah. I completely should have known that. Yeah, I remember looking at this chart. Look at this chart. Look at that. What is this? Seriously, what is that?
USA. But we have 8 times the population and a lot more cities to take everybody. And even some of the most pro-immigration pundits are admitting that even we are having problems.
Yeah.
In Canada, migration is also a little bit different, because a higher share of new arrivals are already relatively wealthy people moving to the country who come through skilled or student visa programs.
Yep.
For some of these people, the job opportunities in Canada are entirely secondary to its political stability, safe environment, and strong property rights.
There's a secondary problem with that too, and it's not necessarily a problem of the fact that they're doing it, but it's the problem of the fact that there's so many of them doing it. And that's the fact that a lot of the time when the immigrants come in, they send money back. So say, you know, there's 6 or 7 of them. They got mom, dad, you know, 2 or 3 brothers and sisters, whatever. They all got their family back home. You know, oldest brother is now a software designer for some big company. He's got to fly over to Canada or whatever. He's going to be a software engineer. And so they got to fly him to Canada so he can learn how to be a software engineer. Well, he learns to be a software engineer, makes $150,000 a year, and sends 3/4 of it back to his parents, and now they're rich. In 2 countries. And then he's here for, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that, and then they fly back. Or, if they really want to, then the family flies over here. Once they're all set. Like, we're like a jumping board for those who can already jump 12 feet. That's exactly what we are. It's like, if you can already jump 12 feet high, if you're an NBA player already, then you can come to Canada and you can be the best NBA player. Like, oh, but if you can't reach that jumping board, you're in a tent. Like, it's just, it's getting crazy at this point.
A home in Canada is a very safe way to park money in a country that has its problems, to be fair, but is still relatively safe compared to some countries where people feel like the government could seize their wealth at any given moment. This has led to a strategy known as land banking.
A lot of countries have either civil or, you know, national wars. They get into it. So, you know, their houses get destroyed, they get bombed, or like, you know, there's some other places have earthquakes, tsunamis, you know, horrendous storms or tornadoes and stuff like that. Canada's pretty good. Besides like hail damage in some areas, Canada's pretty good.
People will get a family member with a visa of some sort, often just a student residency, to buy a property purely as a safe store of value. Now, to be fair, the Canadian government is aware of this, and they have implemented new taxes on vacant dwellings, but it remains a popular way for people to keep their money safe, especially since people have figured out creative strategies.
Well, it's also not a problem because a lot of times, you know, like he's saying, people will park the money in the houses, and oh, well, now there's a big tax on vacant homes. Well, so now let's rent them out. So now we don't just have a store of money. We don't just have a little deposit of money and wealth and property and value in a country. But we're also literally making money in that country. Like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
For avoiding this tax anyway. For others, it's a lot easier to get a skilled worker visa in Canada than it is in the US. So even if jobs don't pay as well up there, they pay a lot better than similar work in developing countries. Now, this immigration has been used to help support an aging population and fill in skill gaps that existing Canadians just aren't paid enough to do. But it's been seen by investors as further proof that buying real estate is always going to be a safe bet because the government needs to bring more people into the country to keep things working. Now, this is still only half the problem, but it does impact the other half as well. Canadians love investing in housing, but it's been so good that they haven't been as excited about investing in anything else. And when they do invest in actual businesses that generate cash flow, US-based companies have been more attractive than their own homegrown businesses.
Yep.
The entire combined market capitalization of the biggest listed companies in Canada is less than Apple, Microsoft, or Nvidia individually. This is why Canadian companies can't pay as well as the big American companies.
Listen to that.
And this also means that a lot.
Listen to this again, please.
Than their own homegrown businesses. The entire combined market capitalization of the biggest listed companies in Canada is less than Apple, Microsoft, or Nvidia individually. This is why Canadian.
And that's the problem, because nobody fucking cares about Canadian businesses. Nobody cares. Like, we don't do anything. And then, like I said, most of our money just goes back to the States again. So, like, we're not growing as a country. We're just sinking and sinking and sinking and sinking, and this causes other people to sink and sink and sink. And now you're putting families with children out on the streets. It's ridiculous.
Companies can't pay as well as the big American companies. And this also means that a lot of talent leaves Canada to get better paying jobs here in the States. If you had the choice between living in Toronto, where the average house costs 4 times as much as the average in Houston, and you could make more money down in Texas, which would you choose? I'm actually asking. If you are Canadian, leave a comment down below.
Sorry, let me listen. I was too busy like in my head thinking about all the bullshit of this country. Let me listen to that again.
Choice between living in Toronto, where the average house costs 4 times as much as the average in Houston, and you could make more money down in Texas, which would you choose?
Wait, what? I need to go back further, I think.
American companies. And this also means that a lot of talent leaves Canada to get better paying jobs here in the States. If you had the choice between living in Toronto, where the average house costs 4 times as much as the average in Houston, and you could make more money down in Texas, which would you choose?
Oh, yeah, no. I actually want to move to Texas. Actually, like 100% I want to move to Texas, and I probably will. Within the next year, 2 or 3 years, probably, I want to say. Actually, I want to get out of here. I think Canada is sinking and sinking and sinking, and I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to fixed, you know, at least within 5 to 6 years. I think, and that's even if Pierre gets in. That's if Pierre gets in. It'll take him at least 5 to 6 years to start to correct the country. And by then, I could already, like, have my life set in another country. Or another, you know, well, yeah, country and state. Yeah. Why would I want to stay here? Of course, yeah. I'd go to Texas. I'd go to Texas right now. Get a gun. Hell yeah.
I'm actually asking, if you are Canadian, leave a comment down below. Let's take a little poll here. Either way, hundreds of thousands of mostly young Canadians are making that move every year, making the country even more dependent on immigration to avoid catastrophe. Even outside of attracting financing, starting a business is much harder in Canada because of generally less business-friendly regulations, a smaller domestic market, less talent, and the fact that commercial real estate is expensive too. Canada is a clear example that a real estate problem
they're super stingy with business loans because all businesses are like whatever the percentage of businesses will fail. They are so stingy. Excuse me. They're so stingy with giving out any kind of loan for businesses and stuff like that. They've only just recently started a program where you can get a small business loan of like 1.125 mil. I was like 1,125,000. It's a decent amount, especially for a small business. But I think you have to have like prerequisites and like all these other kinds of things that just make it not that great. Oh, and it's also hard to find. You can't just search up 1.125 mil loan Canada small business loan whatever and find it. You actually have to do some research, go through the MCSA website, and like holy fuck, it's actually kind of a nightmare to find it sometimes. I know what I'm looking for and I can't find it half the time. So yeah, it's just frustrating the stuff that they try to pull. And I swear it's on purpose.
An everything problem, and it can be hard to realize this until it's too late. Slowly letting down this house of cards without blowing up record levels of household debt is potentially going to last.
Trudeau is a big problem too. I don't know if he'll mention it. Maybe around here it looked like Trudeau was somewhere. I don't know, but yeah, Trudeau is a really big problem too. He's literally stealing taxpayer money just to build million-dollar cottages, multi-hundred-million-dollar cottages on lakefronts. He's flying and doing, you know, $180,000 flights with like filet mignon, caviar type shit on the plane. Like the best fucking food you could ever imagine on a plane just for a 3-day flight and like, or a 4-day trip, and 2 or 3 of the days he would basically spend flying. But he wants to push carbon tax because it's such a big problem. Alright.
Decades. Already, people are struggling because almost all mortgages in Canada are given on adjustable rates, which means that as rates have increased to combat inflation, the rates people are paying on their mortgages have also gone up considerably, even if they originally took on the mortgage when rates were low. Some mortgage repayments have doubled or tripled in the last 4 years, making it hard for a lot of families to afford much else besides the roof over their head. So yeah, Canada might make you feel better, but don't get too smug just yet. Here in America, we are not too far behind.
Because this is only part of the problem. Even if let me go back a little further. Even if you could afford the actual base payments of just this mortgage interest payments, and you know, if you could just pay your mortgage, all your utilities, your fucking what is? There's like a hair keeps bugging my fucking nose. If you could just pay your property tax, your mortgage, your utilities, and do all that stuff, like, you know, 2-3 years ago, now you can't even do that sometimes. So the problem isn't that's what I was gonna say. The problem isn't just that. That's not just the big problem, and that is a big problem, but that's not just the problem. The other problem is that you have to be approved for the mortgage, and if you don't make, you know, 180,000 plus for, you know, a decent sized house, they're not giving you the loan. They're not giving you a mortgage. You're not buying the house. You know, if you're not making hundreds and thousands of dollars a year, you're never getting a nice house. Maybe if you're a single person, if you're a single dude spending bare minimum insurance, you know, shitty car, you know, you spend the bare minimum and make $50,000 to $60,000, you might be able to get a 1-bedroom, just like small, tiny little shack sort of house. You might, but they stress test you out the ass. They do like 8 different types of checks and balances. It's insane, the process that you have to go through to get a house in Canada. It's actually, it's so like demoralizing for most people, especially if you have a big family. You need to make a lot of money. So it's really big problem.
Doubled or tripled in the last 4 years, making it hard for a lot of families to afford much else besides the roof over their head.
Yeah.
So yeah, Canada might make you feel better, but don't get too smug just yet. Here in America, we are not too far behind, and our lending standards are not as robust as Canada's. Canada is keeping their housing market afloat with the immigration fire hose. We are doing it with 1% down payment mortgages and corporate real estate investments. Our incomes may on average be higher, but that's pulled up by a lot of few extremely high-income earners in the concentrated industries that have made places like Seattle and San Francisco into what they are today. Unaffordable, gentrified hellscapes. The income floor in Canada for the people most hurt by unaffordable...
One in 4 Canadians living in poverty. Revolutionary Youth... 1 in 4 Canadians are now living in poverty. That's insane. Like, clearly it's not working.
Housing is higher assuming they can find a job. Now, if you are Canadian and these videos got you feeling a bit depressed, just remember it could be worse. You could be Australia. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see us cover that.
You could also be in Palestine, or not Palestine. I don't know if they're getting attacked. Wherever's getting attacked around there, you could be in Ukraine, you could be in South Africa, you could be in Russia, you could be in North Korea. It's pretty rare. I think there's only like 1,000 people there, something like that. But you could be, yeah. I mean, it could always be worse, so